Honestly, The Rings of Power is a weird show. There are many great and many terrible things in the first season. In this review, I'm gonna be talking about how I felt about the first season of The Rings of Power. First of all, let's talk about Balrog. Because we all knew that there would be Balrog in the show. The show itself has been hinting about it since the first episode when Elrond arrived to Moria. But that Balrog reveal at the end of the episode 7 was kinda terrible in my opinion. They could have just hinted that there is Balrog somewhere in the depth of Moria, but save him for the next seasons. But they just had to show Balrog. They had to show fans that they have Balrog in the show. And moreover, this Balrog looks exactly like Balrog from Peter Jackson's trilogy. I really think it would be better if they saved Balrog for the next season. His first appearance wasn't nearly as great as I expected, unfortunately. But my biggest complaint about the Rings of Power show has got to be that the show is basically Amazon's weird mishmash of the main events that happened during the Second Age and the Third Age too. There are literally thousands of years between Sauron's return to power in Mordor and the birth of Isildur and the Durin's Bane. But Amazon basically decided to put this all into one show that spans across 5 seasons and probably 20 years or so. There are 2000 years between forging of the Rings of Power and the birth of Isildur. But they're all here at the same show. And Durin's Bane, the Balrog of Morgoth that awakens in the depths of Moria, doesn't even belong in the Second Age. There is a good reason why Christopher Tolkien didn't sell the rights for Silmarillion. Christopher Tolkien knew that Hollywood would turn Silmarillion into some sort of serialized franchise. But Amazon managed to do it without even buying the rights for Silmarillion. They just put everything they could into one big cauldron and named it The Rings of Power. But I am not the biggest fan of Tolkien, so I can perfectly tolerate the violations of the lore. As long as the show is entertaining and good and I enjoy watching it, I can forgive the writers many things, really. That's the reason why I really liked the Hobbit trilogy, even though it was not nearly as good as the Lord of the Rings trilogy. But unfortunately, the Rings of Power has many problems with writing. There are problems with some basic logic in the show. Galadriel was trying to convince Miriel to send ships to the Middle Earth for like 3 episodes. After she finally agreed, Numenorians arrived to the Middle Earth. Then they saved a village of 20 people, maybe less. And after that they decided to return to Numenor. And I really wish that I was exaggerating, but that's precisely what happened in the show. They just came to Middle Earth for 2 episodes and then returned. And Isildur's supposed death, just why? We all know how the show is gonna end eventually. The last alliance of the men and the elves defeating Sauron and Isildur taking the One Ring. You don't even need to read Tolkien to know that. That's basically at the beginning of the Fellowship of the Ring. So we all know that Isildur survived. And his supposed death has no intrigue whatsoever. They're just repeating what happened to Aragorn in Two Towers, but with Isildur. In addition to logical problems, the show just feels pretty boring. Seriously though, they established so many plot lines in the first 3 episodes of the show, but they didn't convince me that I should care about these plot lines and these characters. The Harfoots and the Stranger, that was probably my least favorite plot line of the show. And up until the final episode of the season, I didn't even care about what would happen to these characters. That false reveal that Stranger is Sauron was kinda unexpected. For 20 minutes I even believed that the Stranger was Sauron, not Halbrand. I think it would have been better if it was the ending of the previous episode. If the previous episode ended up with this cliffhanger, but the writers chose Balrog instead. Another problem with the script is how Harfoot's constantly brag about how they don't leave anyone behind. And then 10 minutes later literally leave Nori's father behind because of his injured foot. And he would have died definitely if it wasn't for Stranger who helped.
Nobody goes off trail. That's right. Nobody goes off trail.
This is unfortunately not the only ridiculous moment in this show. But that's enough with negativity. There are some positive moments too. I really loved the characters of Durin and Disa, and Moria's scenes were probably the best scenes of the entire show. The dialogues between Durin and his father were really well written and well played by the actors.
My friend is drowning, reaching for me to pull him to shore. You expect me to swat his hand away because you're afraid of a bloody rockfall?
The fate of the elves was decided many ages ago by minds much wiser, much farther seeing than our own.
The birth of the Mount Doom was quite epic, and I thoroughly enjoyed the final episode, probably the best episode of the whole show. And as I mentioned in my previous video about the Rings of Power, the level of cinematography and visual effects is really great. The only moment where CGI really bothered me was the first appearance of the Warg in the episode 3. Apart from that, you can really see where the budget went. From a visual perspective, the show looks better than any TV show I've seen. All in all, The Rings of Power is a show filled with the moments of brilliancy and breathtaking visual effects, but massively suffering from underwhelming writing, lots of plot holes, and gruesome violations of Tolkien's lore. The first season, despite its good moments, was pretty disappointing. I can just hope that the next seasons will be improved and we'll get a great show. But so far negative clearly outweighs positive, unfortunately. And now let's just wait to see what Amazon prepared for the next season.